In 2019, I went on a quest to find organizations that actually made sustainable change. And that change and that quest brought three things. First, Sustainable, Happy, Profit. That's the book, how companies and products, in fact, we can thrive. Two, the Agile Sustainability Manifesto. How can we evolve our practice and guide our solutions? And three, the Coalition of the Willing. Now, before I get into the topics of today, this is how I design our time together, a slight diamond shape, where we're going to do diversion, conversion, but also we're going to level up the playing field. And then who doesn't like a little bit of liberating structure? I sort of bundled the thing in three sections. What, which is the state of affairs. So what, why this matter, why do we care? And now what? So the action-oriented section, so you can roll up your sleeve and get on with it as we leave this room, pretty much. At least that's the aim. I assume that you heard about the warming of our planet, the rather scary predictions. Some of you may have read the highlights report of the latest IPCC. We could be talking about GDP and how, in fact, it's not a good measure of a healthy economic system, and or how GDP, in fact, is decoupled of harming emissions. We could also look at multiple different variables and how are they related, in fact, with the Industrial Revolution. But what I don't want to do is feed the overwhelm. In the subject of sustainability, we have a huge feedback delay, and we know how that plays. Like, think about this. If we had a magic switch to turn all the emissions off right now, it will take decades, if not centuries, to see what we have already emitted into the atmosphere. So I want to bring this home, down to earth, and I'd like to start with some questions I think we should really be asking ourselves. How would we feed ourselves? So let's do a check in the room. Raise your hand if your work is somehow related to our food system. Okay, well, look around. This is going to increase year on year. Our food system is a broken, complex, adaptive system. And that is where we come in. Where we come in. The food system doesn't work for everyone, and it certainly does not work for the environment. Petrochemical agriculture, which is often the case, petrochemical agriculture, has turned agriculture in one of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. Pollution, pushing species into extinction. And it just has a huge financial cost in terms of health, in terms of biodiversity loss. And even if we only look at inputs, math, the amount of fresh water use, land use, chemicals, energy, taxpayers' money. I mean, don't forget that most of it is holding up because of subsidiaries. It's our taxpayers' money. We can do better. We also manage to waste 2/3 of it, whilst 10% of the population goes hungry. And we, at the Lean Agile Conference, we know we can do better. How would we harness energy, and how will we store what we learn? Now, I ask this because I assume that many of us are Our work is related to technology. Now, technology is not an industry in itself anymore. In my mind, it's a fabric layer of any business. And IT, information and technology, needs these two things. So if we are to uncover better ways to deliver software technology by doing it and helping others to do it, well, our grid can cope with the demand. Especially AI and quantum computing are really pushing these figures. Our grid can cope with the forecast. Internet alone, almost 4% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And we know that just by collecting data doesn't necessarily drive better decisions. So how we better respond to change? How will we make things? And I ask this because, especially for the technologists in the room, we tend to think that our work is somehow abstract from the physical world when we are very bounded to materials. We are bounded to natural laws, regardless if we are aware of it or not, if we like it or not. And if Agile should help us to increase predictability and reduce risk, well, here are some risks. We're consuming already at the rate of almost 2 planet Earths. And if everybody was behaving and consuming how we do it in the tiniest leader of the northwestern side of the world, we would be at the rate of 5 Earths. And that is not sustainable. We certainly need to be more lean. Now, how would we heal ourselves? That's another check in the room. Who here works somehow related to our healthcare system? Okay, nice, okay. It's one of the fastest growing industries, and that includes biotech. Yet again, a broken, complex, adaptive system, and that's where we come in. Air pollution alone, responsible for almost 4 million deaths a year. And in London, the city that we're in today, 7,000 deaths a year, preventable deaths. And it's not just pollution. Climate change has a direct impact in health and in fluctuation of diseases. So how can we Agilists can help this interrelated with huge pressures and demands industry? Systems thinking, anyone? And wrapping up the questions here with the state of business that affect us, each and every one of us, as stakeholders, as customers, as employees, as investors, as hopefully active part of our civic life. And that's where my work and my research is focused on. And I can tell you one thing. There is a better way to do business. Because our business, as usual, is the most unusual. We looked at air pollution. We already converted 75% of land, pushing 1 million species towards extinction. And 6 of the 9 greatest threats to the world are directly related to ongoing destruction of nature, and that's destruction made by us, humans, one species. We need to be more lean and certainly more agile. We have no time to waste. Now, question for you. What is becoming more apparent? And how is that related to your work? here is where I introduce you a framework, and we know those things could be helpful. Now, this is a visual representation. I think it's a great information radiator of the concept of the planetary boundaries, where anything that stays within the green section means that we are operating in our safe space. Anything that goes beyond that, we surpass, we overshoot where we should be. And I'm not going to lie, it doesn't look great. But let's not go into despair, because we can turn things around. In fact, we have already done it. We have successfully turned things around. Ozone layer, anyone? So we can do it at the speed, at the magnitude, globally, as it's required. So that's planetary boundaries. And assume many of you know the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, 17 global goals, legally binding to the Paris Agreement of what we ought to achieve by 2050, and many of which have targets much earlier on. For example, 5.5 years from now, 2030, we should have half our emissions. As a country, as a continent, as a company, as a sports activity on the weekend, as a household, as an individual, as department, half our emissions. Now, some of the Sustainable Development Goals are, in fact, related to the planetary boundaries. Some are related to what's called social layer, social capital, access to quality education, a fair and just world. Now, if we combine these two things, we come up with something like that, not we, Kate Bradford, which this is called the donut economics. And you probably guess why it's called like that. It has a shape of a donut. The outer layer is our ecological ceiling, where we can overshoot. We want to stay in the safe operating space. And then the inner layer is our social foundation, where we don't want to leave anyone behind in terms of access to water, food, health, peace, justice, political voice. This is a framework that is based in a regenerative, distributed economy. Holistic, not partially academic thoughts and concepts, where we tend to think of economy nowadays. And if you're interested in the things, I'm one of the organizations in action for the Donut Economics Action Lab, and I have on the Creative Commons tools, stories for you guys to tap into. Free, just go, change the world. And I want to tell you a bit of a story, which was a few months ago. When you bring these big ideas and try to make them tangible, don't think that has to be massive effort and overly complex. In fact, can be iterative and incremental. It actually works much better. So we appended this effort in an existing conference, about 70 of us. We looked at many of the ideas of the donut economics and translated into our day-to-day practice. It doesn't have to be an all-day thing. It doesn't have to be too complex. Start small and learn fast. When we hear and talk about sustainability, we sort of fall into this dilemma. Is it politics? Is it population? Population, the masses, the individual, what can we do? Politics, well, policies and laws are too slow and have loopholes. But what is obvious to me is that bang in the middle what we have is the great opportunities, organizations. Think about this, 333 million registered companies, right? That gives us the speed, the size, the volume that we need. 333 million versus 249 country codes. And the good news is that organizations are composed of individuals. And we can do good and we can do well in fact, is more rewarding. And also to say that we are incredibly privileged, not just for being here today, but because in our work, we have access and we have ease. Access to key areas of the organization and ease, tools, skills already under our belt. So it's our responsibility. So I did go in this quest. In all honesty, started to make my own company better. How can I learn from organizations that, in fact, looked at sustainability as a fabric layer and downscale those ideas at one-person LTD? If I could downscale those ideas at how my one-person company operates, I would be able to side-scale, upscale, help more people. And it was hard. It was especially hard when narratives and operations had a huge dissonance. Greenwashing. But the ones that I did find had very clear mechanisms, strategies, and many patterns surface. And that's really where Sustainable Happy Profit came about, a way for me to extend the reach of the learnings rather than one talk, one session, one client at a time. I do want to take you through three industries, three examples of some of those learnings. So we have looked at energy. So this is an energy company. And within 10 years, they managed to turn around from 80 fossil to 85 renewables. And they anchor so they could change course. And one of the things that they did was taking an inventory list, and every end of life of each asset was taken as an opportunity to invest where they wanted their vision. Increase market share, increase of profits. So really valuing change. So this is a financial servicing company, a bank, and the figures speak for themselves, essentially what's called ethical portfolios, which we could debate that should be the default, but ethical portfolios are performing better. And they've done and doing many things. But one thing I think is important that we should be asking ourselves, aside of halving our emissions, is also where can you have your biggest impact? And for them, what became obvious, it was niche funding. They could fund key organizations aligning with their purpose. So what is the biggest impact of the company that you work for? And what I also find interesting is that they did many partnerships, one which had more than 150 companies, including the WWF, right in line with SDG 17, which is Partnership for the Goals. Not just valuing customer collaboration, but valuing whole value chain collaboration. And we know what a lever that can be. We look at energy, servicing. I wanted to bring something material. So this is a manufacturing company. Not only reduce their emissions by 70%, no offsets, no, 70% reduction of absolute emissions. And they also created their own framework, really looking essentially at every employee as a problem solver, looking and supporting. And many in the room, I am sure we have stories when, in fact, we do value individuals and interactions. Like wonders can emerge. So you may be thinking, yeah, maybe I start bringing this at work. Yeah, we're getting somewhere. I want to be honest, you are going to face resistance. So what I want to do now, I want to equip you to how to debunk some of the myths. So I bundle up my top 5 myths that you're probably going to hear. So we can ninja them together. Myth one is that people don't care. But people do care. 75% of the workforce will refuse to work for an organization that doesn't have corporate social and environmental responsibility. That's employees. Customers willing to pay more. Investors are eager to find those ethical portfolios. So that's your stakeholders, employees, customers, investors. And for the ones that read and remember the About Us, the About section of the Agile Manifesto, building organizational communities that we want to work for, that we want to be part of. Myth two, ooh, this sounds expensive. It may come with many flavors, or we don't have finance allocated, or there's no budget, or who knows what. But it's official. Since last year, renewables are cheaper. And it's not only when you compare kilowatt hours, but also reduce long-term cost, maintenance, extraction cost, transport. We don't tend to think about these things. So that's energy. Materials, we've seen 99% of the stuff that we buy, we check within 6 months. Or 90% of materials are wasted. Like, imagine not having to invest that on your products. And there is specifically one that just really stood with me, which is there is more gold in e-waste, that stuff like that we no longer use. There is more gold in e-waste that is left on the ground. I mean, what are we doing? So energy, materials, and regeneration. I have this motto of leaving the place better than how we found it. The place, the products, the services, the people, the planet. And we looked at food systems. So regenerative agriculture not only reduces greenhouse gas emissions, sequesters carbon, increases air and water quality, increases biodiversity, generates better returns, and creates a resilient system. So if something goes wrong over here, you can still feed your nation. So what about if we harness change for competitive advantage? The myth of, well, we are bounded to market and politics, you know. It may come with the flavor of, I don't have enough influence. We have successful examples through history of achieving, at extraordinary odds, political change. We've done it before. We can do it again. The myth of you are compromising growth and profit. But really, let's look where the growth and profit is going, because floods, those are figures from the Midwest in the US in 2010. 60 million, literally, down the drain. And per 1% increase of rainfall, there is a loss of almost 2% of GDP. So that's water. Let's look at fire. And it's not only in California, it's happening everywhere. It's happening close, it's happening fast, it's happening often. But from the figures of 17 and 18, in California, a loss of a quarter-century profits. And every year globally, we burn 1% of GDP. And then I don't have to remind you, we had some sessions earlier that remind us about not having pods, right? We have weaker and weaker value chains, war, conflicts, epidemics, supply chain logistics, because we can pass the boat where it should go. And just, again, some example of car companies that just had to shut their operations. So how can we better respond to change? If the team is really to pause at regular intervals, reflect, how to be more effective, and then tune and adjust accordingly, I do think we're missing part of the picture. And the fifth of the top 5 is that, but sustainability, it is too complex. I mean, it's too complex. We're talking about the biosphere, but we don't have to do it alone. Let's tap into each other's potential. And just by achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, there is 12 trillion up for grabs. So this is what is up for grabs. So if our highest priority is early and continuous delivery of value, let's start bringing some of this home. And also remember that only a few years ago, we were reminded that when we focus on what matters, when we reduce the noise, focus on what matters, we can do the change at the speed, at the magnitude that we just wouldn't thought otherwise. And in sustainability, and also, in fact, in any change, and change enablers here in the room, you know this, when we have a challenge, we have this inertia to sort of look at the problem on a narrow way. And I think this visual explains it quite well, which is the carbon tunnel vision, where we are just looking at carbon emissions, and we have to halve our emissions. But we should also account for biodiversity, and we have to tackle overconsumption. Now, when at work, when we look at sustainability, we tend to feel complacent, especially on the value chain. So here is the golden rule. When something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So tell you a story with this organization that I support, Stop the Traffic, and their sole mission is to eradicate human trafficking and modern slavery. And you'll be surprised, it's closer than you think. It is far away, it is close, it's in this country, it's also in this city. It's in the food that we eat, materials, energies, devices, stuff we use, clothes we wear. It's in our healthcare system. Question for you. What is more clear? And how is that related to your work? Hold that thought, because after this session, and you have whole day tomorrow, share this with somebody else, especially someone that you haven't spoken with yet. Not only I'm giving you a great networking opportunity here, but also let's tap into each other's potential. Like, if we want to go far, we better go together. So we're getting into the action section. 50 billion. 50 billion. This is the amount sitting in this room. 50 billion of a very conservative guesstimate of the annual revenue where we can make an impact. So let's put the money where we want the world to go. It's as simple and as powerful as that. Let's put the money, let's put the head, the heart, the efforts there too. So talking money, the 7 years after the Paris Agreement, the top private banks pump an extra 5.5 trillion into the fossil industry. That's our bank accounts, that's our saving accounts. You can type in organizations like bank.green and find out what's the rating of your bank. And if you don't like it, change it. I changed my banks, my household banks, my company banks, and you might not be able to change your employer, but you can share what you learn, you can influence, and you can lobby. So that's banks. But don't forget about pensions. And we don't tend to think about pensions that way. In the UK, every £10 you put into your pension, 2 goes directly into deforestation. You can tap into organizations like Make My Money Matter, and within 30 seconds, you'll be sending, if you want, a letter to your pension provider asking them to stop using your pension money for fossils, deforestation, and other horrid industries. Just couldn't be easier. And then insurance, yeah, that's also money. And I know we have some people from insurance in the room. And in fact, if any of you knows an ethical underwriting for a one-person LTD, please come and talk to me. So here are some homework at individual level. Banks, pensions, and insurance. Now, when bringing these big ideas into how we develop products, services, what I found quite helpful is to bring the concept of circular economy. And in fact, I'm a circular economy professional from Cambridge University. And essentially, circular economy, what it is moving away of our really linear way of producing, which is we take things from Earth, we make stuff with it, and then we waste it. Take, make, waste. And instead, we want to move into a much more circular way, where you reduce, reuse, repurpose. There is the model of the 7 Rs, the 9 Rs, the 11 Rs. Yeah. But essentially, circular economy has 3 key principles. And we know principles can help guiding our decisions. So aligning speed, principle 1, which is keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible. This is the butterfly diagram, and essentially what it's showing you on the right-hand side, you have the manufacturing thing, the product gets to the user, and then you do many things, potential revenue streams, to keep that products and materials in use for longer. And then at the very end, you have this icon of recycling. And it's at the very end because it's one of the most expensive things you can do in terms of finance, effort, energy, transport. Yet if we are lucky, recycling is our default or our second option. And then on the right-hand side, what you have is the biological side of things, so tapping into ecosystem services. And again, remember that the things we do on the right have a chemical reaction on the left. And when you start looking at those things, potentially you can find things like byproducts, such as in this image is biogas. And just with a customer looking at stuff like that, releasing 2 new revenue streams. So, principle 1, keeping products and materials in use. Principle 2, reduce waste and pollution. And here I'm going to talk to you something that you already know. The first time that I published the evolution of value stream mapping was in the handbook version of the Sustainable Happy Profit. But essentially, we put so much time and effort. We have this already in our toolbox, in our experience, value stream mapping. Yet, when we come together, we only look at reducing waste of one variable. That's waste of time. So I hope that you find compelling enough to use all that time and effort to put together the value stream mapping and also elevate our craft and look at, yes, waste of time, finance, effort, but also materials and energy. I was working with one of the biggest utility companies here in the UK, and we looked at especially the side of sort of connecting different devices to your home so you can have better energy decisions, And we looked at streamlining the return process, and it became very apparent what was happening in the physical side of things, what was happening in the warehouse. And just by looking at stuff like that, we had a really nice resellable opportunity and also a reduction of warehouse costs. And then principle 3, which is regenerate natural systems. Here I bring you this image of what's called the life principles. That's the life principles of biomimicry. And in essence, biomimicry is inspiration, innovation inspired by nature. Right? Really understanding that the solutions to our problems are already being here. They have been solved. Our problems have been solved. They are, those mechanisms, those strategies are in the living beings surrounding us. If only we quiet our cleverness and start looking at the solutions that exist out there, that have been refined, tuned, and adjusted for 3.8 billion years of existence. The ones alive are holding the answers, not the fossils. And the ethos at the center of biomimicry is creating conditions that are conducive to life. Like, imagine a world where at the core of our ethos, we would be creating conditions that are conducive to life. It really makes me think about the pursuit of technical excellence and good design. I mean, it's here. And biomimicry is a huge subject, but if you're interested, I put some info there in the QR code. Remember our privilege. We have access and we have ease. So where do you want the world to go? How do you want to be part of it? What is between then and now? Therefore, what's next? So 3 super tangible things for you to action if you want. First, if you haven't yet, come and check out the Agile Sustainability Manifesto. I know some of you already signed. Put your name on it, pledge. And most importantly, leverage it to guide our decisions. I mean, it really is time for us to take our own practice up a notch. Two, the Green Software Foundation. I'm champion for the Green Software Foundation, and you have tools already, stuff like the Impact Framework that you can use already with your teams. It's already available for you. And in this QR code, what you have is for free, a course about green software. And it's a really good baseline course in terms of how do we develop our solutions in a way that we reduce the stress into our grid, we are conscious of our materials, we make better decisions in terms of processing, if, when, what processing. And then 3, come and join us at the coalition. So 4 weeks program, hands-on program, moving from the quest is to move people from theoretical agreement, we need to do something, to tangible, impactful action. And like with any change, that's the biggest and the hardest step. That's where we lose people. From, yeah, we should do something, okay, I'm doing it. So that's the aim. Moving from urgency into agency. Not just living with knowledge about circular economy, sustainable development goals, complexity science, but the practical hands-on during 4 weeks within your context. And I have 1 seat left for the one starting 5th of June. So if anybody's interested, come and grab me. Now, I would like to finish with this thought. And this is home. We must deeply understand this. There are no boundaries. We all breathe the same air. This is our home, which is not ours alone.